That takes us to item number 9. The presentation on the Route 66 specific plan, and Planning Director Kugel will report. Thank you, John.
Just give me 1 second to pull up the presentation. A couple months ago, the City Council asked me to provide a presentation on a number of projects, and lastly on the Route 66 specific plan itself, which is the zoning land regulation document, the comprehensive plan for the entire Route 66 corridor covering from Barranca in the west to all the way to Amelia on the east side of the city. Kind of just as a general reminder for everybody, this part of the city's main responsibilities is to maintain a general plan for the city as well as a zoning code. The purpose of the zoning code, which includes the specific plan, is to regulate land use in terms of development and as well as how property can be used in the city. One of the tools that state zoning law provides us is the ability to do more comprehensive planning in the form of a specific plan, which can not only include general land use regulations such as how high big buildings can be, but also is and the types of uses that may be done on any particular property in any area. But it can provide for more comprehensive design guidelines, guidelines for public infrastructure, for streetscape improvements, and other things, other policies that the city wants to accomplish through a land use plan, such as a specific plan. The city has several specific plans in the city. And this one covers, like I said, the entire corridor of Route 66. So what I wanted to do tonight, if you'll sort of indulge my presentation, because it is a pretty, in going through, if you had a chance to read the 20-page report, which goes through each area, I'm going to try to summarize as much as I can, and at the same time provide you what you wanted, I think, which was a comprehensive overview of the Route 66 specific plan, because given the results of the survey, it seems like it's one topic that people are interested in, and there's a number of developments going on that residents in the city have seen and may not have ever heard of the Route 66 specific plan. So kind of going back in the plan's history, it was adopted in 2003 as the main land use policy document for the corridor, but even prior to that, in the late 1990s, the city, it was instigated because of the city's concern and the community's concern over conditions of deterioration on the corridor, zoning and land use development patterns that appeared to be haphazard in some instances, that there were uses that conflicted with each other, where you may have, a mobile home park, a church, an auto repair use, and there just didn't seem to be any sense in the corridor, and the community was concerned that not only the negative condition of the corridor itself, but that the image of the corridor as a deteriorating area could have long-term negative effects on the city. And I wanted to kind of start off to kind of go over some photographs of areas where I think if you read the attachments, particularly the draft memo from the Alosta Corridor Committee, it gives you an idea of what types of things they were talking about. Sort of, marginal uses, as you can see here. You've essentially got a shed, you've got a converted old house on Route 66. Some of these situations where businesses are not what the vision of the corridor committee was trying to accomplish. Well, for example, the Altadena Dairy here has been here quite a long time. It's sort of in a deteriorating condition on a very small lot. Just a few other, of course, there were some uses like the Bright Star Tavern, which recently got a new paint job, but it's still the Bright Star Tavern, a non-conforming bar. And I think the same architect designed our place, and just as an example of things that are they're kind of the character of Route 66 right now. But I think the committee was trying to change that. Also, the proliferation of auto uses, and it's not that auto uses were not desired or not needed. I mean, everybody drives a car. You have to get from point A to point B. but it was the configuration and location. And while this is not a unattractive building, you have auto bays facing the street, cars practically having to park on the sidewalk. In some cases, you have older uses where cars are being worked on outside. Just a proliferation along the corridor, old used car lots, which people, rather than, and here you have an old, again, house that looks like it was built probably in the, late 30s, early 40s, at some point in there, and the best that the property owner can do is, in terms of an investment, is to, rent it out for a used car lot, and nothing really has been done to the property for 60, 70 years. Again, more auto uses. I put this picture here of the Vermont car wash. This was actually one of the priority sites in the Route 66 specific plan to be redeveloped. A number of sites already have. This one has not. In terms of housing, we talked, there were some comments earlier tonight about, the developments going on tonight the focus are housing. And there's already a lot of housing on the Route 66 corridor, but like the picture here, a lot of it's very old. Most of the rental housing stock in the city, other than the new developments going up, is 50-ish years old. You also have a lot of mobile home and trailer parks. This is at one of the backside of the parks at Route 66, a mobile home that somebody's living in, and if you notice, it's covered with a tarp. Somebody is, I think, looks like they've done an addition onto the mobile home where it's also, they probably storage or maybe using it as living space. Here's another picture of a park where, again, it's not necessarily mobile homes, but it's trailers. And these are some of the conditions that really, spurred the city into wanting to take a look, at the Route 66 corridor and see what could be done. This is, getting the last couple pictures here. This is just, across from Albertsons near Glendora Avenue, what you would think is a prime piece of real estate where the only thing the property owner is still doing with it is just really primarily storing, RVs on it, on prime frontage. And lastly, just a couple aerial photos of, underutilization of property that were at the time. This is around Pasadena and Route 66 where, the highlighted parcel, this gives you an example of some of the narrow but deep parcels that are on Route 66. You don't have a lot of frontage, so there's not a whole lot of that folks can do. And this development pattern occurred over many decades where, old Joe who had a junkyard just said, hey, I just need a little sliver of this piece of property, and whoever just granted him it, or it somehow got carved off of a larger piece. And, you have situations where really large pieces of property on Route 66 are just used for storage. This will be the last picture here, but this, I think, it's not everywhere on the corridor, but again, these are some of the things, these are the reasons behind the impetus for a Route 66 specific plan, and these are just, some of the pictures that we were able to take going out in one day. Again, getting back to the history, as a result, the city formed the Alosta Corridor Committee in the year 2000. The committee, and not pointing to Monrovia as the ultimate model, but there are a number of places in reading the report and the different studies where the city was looking to Monrovia and the revitalization that had been occurring along Huntington Drive in that city as a model for revitalization. And I'll talk a little bit about how some of those ideas were ultimately incorporated into our specific plan, and some were really not utilized as our corridor being somewhat different than the Huntington Drive corridor in some ways. This committee was made up of 20, I'll call them stakeholders. I've seen the list of names. Some of those I recognize, some of those I don't recognize at all, because this was now 14, 15 years ago, and some people have moved on or they're just not active anymore. But they presented their findings to the council back in 2001. I included the draft report from the committee. Some of the things that they identified that they felt any sort of rezoning or revitalization plan should do, one was to increase the daytime population, and in terms of increasing a job base. And I think this is directly out of the Monrovia playbook, what they had done on East Huntington Drive in terms of really redeveloping that entire corridor, using their redevelopment agency to assemble large tracts of land in order to attract large high-tech office users. And at that time, Monrovia is doing a great job of really picking off businesses that would otherwise have to pay more money and locate in Pasadena. So they had a larger high-tech presence, and I think this committee saw the opportunity to do the same thing. They also wanted to attract more housing to the area. In part, the term restaurant row, we want more restaurant, keeps coming up in some of these older documents that I've read on Route 66, and I still sometimes hear those same things from people. How come we don't have an Olive Garden on Route 66? Also, the location condition of mobile home trailer parks, which I showed you some pictures of. The idea of linking the corridor itself to the village from Route 66. Narrow and ill-configured parcels along Route 66, which don't produce a lot of investment or new investment because of their difficulty to develop, and the need for some consistent and in detailed design guidelines to help guide future development and a vision for the corridor. So with that information in 2002, the city went out and did an RFP and retained the RBF Consulting Group to prepare a comprehensive specific plan for the corridor. That process took over a year. The specifics plan itself lists 10 separate public meetings where the planning process of the specific plan took place, as well as discussions of the specific plan under a variety of different groups. There was a separate ad hoc specific plan review committee that was formed to review the plan once it was completed, and then it was adopted by the council. So there was lots of public input on the plan itself, although again it was in the early 2000s. And also as part of this process to sort of put the Alosta name behind us in terms of what that represented, and I think this was really in part one, it was renaming the corridor Route 66. I think really reading it was in part a way to try to get some higher visibility for the corridor in terms of how it might be marketed for restaurants or other businesses that might want to go there, and also sort of help inform a design type of element that ultimately made its way into the Route 66 specific plan. So in 2003, this document was adopted. It's essentially been the same document as it was back in 2003. There have been very few significant changes to it. I'll kind of highlight those as I go through the different sub-districts and how the specific plan is organized. One of the main differences, just to start off, because you won't really see that here, one of the specific plan really originally emphasized streamlining a review process, in other words, because we had a specific plan to really make it easier for developers to come in and get permits quickly. And so there was a staff level design or development review committee that was incorporated as part of this plan. That was eliminated fairly early on, I think probably around 2005. And so the plan was amended to eliminate that level of review, and virtually everything that happens in Route 66 now goes to the Planning Commission or the council ultimately, depending on the type of project. Kind of as they were doing the specific plan and to take the Alosta Corridor Committee's sort of base level recommendations and notions they had about really trying to replicate Huntington Drive with its east section, job base with businesses like Aero Environment and other high-tech businesses, and on the west side, that retail element that, such as a restaurant row, some hotels, etc. The city also hired the Hoffman company, and there was an economic market study or highest and best use study that was part of the Route 66 specific plan, and it confirmed some of the things that the Alosta Corridor Committee was trying to put forth, but at the same time it was called, for better, sort of a dose of reality about what was really viable in the Route 66 corridor and why it was different than Monrovia. Rather than go into detail what those were, I think here's some of the things they concluded that there wasn't really enough demand for a lot of new retail along Route 66. That a restaurant row, for a variety of reasons, really was not going to work on Route 66 because, in part, it's not really close to a freeway. and it's sort of off the beaten track against the foothills. Again, hotels are not supportable in the area. They advise that use your redevelopment agency, however, to assemble land. Unfortunately, we don't have a redevelopment agency, so that tool, as part of implementing the specific plan, is gone. Expand the population base with new multifamily development. Focus on mixed use with office and residential development, and expand the office business park market within your community, which would be the jobs. Just sort of, I won't go through really any of these, but just know that within the specific plan, it really starts out with some broad planning factors, guiding principles, land use objectives, circulation objectives, and urban design objectives. It sets sort of a broad and sometimes specific policy statement schedule that takes up really the first part of the specific plan, and I included some of those that I felt that were there. It's not a comprehensive list in the report, but it's some of the ones that I felt were most relevant that come up in terms of the type of development that we're seeing and what I felt were the things that were coming through as the plan was developed, and they made it into the specific plan and sort of helped guide us. The corridor itself, the specific plan, because it's such a long corridor and because the previous zoning along the corridor had created such a mix of different types of uses, and sometimes there were uses next to other uses that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. The specific plan looked at different areas of the corridor, and it divided it up into originally 7 subdistricts. So there are 7 distinct sub-areas of the specific plan, each with their own development standards, each with their own use table, and while some of them are related, some of them are different. In a nutshell, really, the western end of the specific plan is I'll call that the mixed use area. The east end is more of the commercial, light industrial, office, high-tech R&D area. But I'm going to talk about each sub-district, and I'm going to work my way from west to east, and I'll try to give you a flavor of, I'm not going to go through each of the development standards, painstakingly, but I want to give everybody a flavor of the type of development that could occur in each of the sub-districts and where these sub-districts are each located. To the west, the Barranca Gateway sub-district, and you see a map up here. It starts to the west on Barranca. On the north side, as you can see, part of the south side is not in the sub-district. Only the red colored area is the Barranca Gateway sub-district area, and it goes over just to about, this is almost to Grand Avenue. So this is the Wells Fargo here. Or actually, this is Ralph's, sorry. So it hits the edge of Ralph's going to Barranca, and you have Forestdale right here. The intent of the Barranca Gateway, it is the western gateway, and I think you'll see this theme throughout the specific plan. One of the design objectives of the specific plan, the city wanted to create various sort of gateway statement entry points at key intersections along the corridor. And the first one, as you come into Glendora from the west, Barranca was that first corridor. It also, in this sub-district, was envisioned to take advantage of the proximity of APU and Citrus College. The district specifically encourages retail as well as the development of student housing that might occur within this area, although none of that has actually happened specifically in terms of student housing. There has been some residential development, and it emphasizes mixed use, and mixed use meaning residential and commercial, as well as restaurants and offices that could separately be allowed that were not residentially oriented. So it all, in terms of kind of giving you a flavor of what the development standards are like, it encourages street-oriented and pedestrian-level development. Pretty much all throughout the western end of the corridor, the emphasis is on placing buildings nearer to the street. It's about increasing the height and overall intensity of development along the corridor for the purpose of generating economic development. This is one of the 2 sub-districts that has a maximum setback. There are 2 sub-districts, I'll talk about the other one as I head east, that you cannot, if you're going to build something, you cannot put buildings any further back from the property line than, in this case, 15 feet, which is unusual. If you own a single-family home like most of us do, you have a minimum setback, where you can't build anything closer to the street than a particular area. This is different, and it's the intent is to place development near the street. The types of uses that could occur, to give you an example, you can do commercial development of different types, again oriented to the street. There are development incentives to encourage particular types of development and activities. Those particular types of development really are mixed use, as well as combining some of these smaller lots into larger conforming lots for better and more intense development. Again, getting that mixed use with the commercial at the ground floor and the residential above. With these incentives, this sub-district permits up to 45 units per acre, with a maximum height of 35 feet or 2 stories. However, if you do mixed use, you can get that third story. It doesn't give you, the code does not talk about a particular height, but it says 3 stories for this sub-district. To give you an idea of what this type of development might look like, this is the Forestdale and Route 66 project. This is in the Barranca Gateway sub-district. This project took advantage of the mixed-use development incentive. Instead of 2 stories, it is 3 stories. It's about 45 feet tall at the ridge of the roof line, and it hits about 54 feet tall. This is the elevator on this project. It's just over 30 units to the acre in terms of the density. This is a surface parked apartment building, stacked flats is the type of development. They're apartments within this sub-district. The next sub-district heading west is the Grand Avenue Gateway. The Grand Avenue Gateway is from Route 66 here, heading south on the ground, all the way to Baseline. So it extends way beyond Route 66 itself. And at the time they were designing this corridor, one of the themes that keeps coming up again is they viewed Grand as a gateway from the freeway into the city, and they wanted to have a comprehensive, not only development standards and a development plan, but a streetscape plan that would draw people up to Route 66. Because again, in the economic report, the Hoffman report that was done, one of the weaknesses relative to, let's say, Huntington Drive or other areas was that this area was not an area that you could attract people to. So they wanted to create a visual type of effect, ultimately, to attract people to this area. Like Barranca Gateway, it is a mixed-use type of area. The area allows both housing and commercial development and encourages mixed-use development, and much of the things that are permitted in the Barranca Gateway are permitted in the Grand Gateway. There are very similar sub-districts. But in terms of the setbacks and what you could see from the street, whereas Barranca Gateway has a maximum setback to the front, the Grand Gateway has a minimum setback. So buildings have to be further away than 10 feet versus no further than 10 feet. It is very similar. It allows a little bit higher development. With the development incentives for mixed use and lot consolidation, you can get up to 4 stories. 45 units to the acre, it's the same density, but you can get a little bit more height in the Grand Gateway. So somebody in theory, let's say the county office or the Grand, the Ralphs went up for sale or something. Somebody could come in and propose a mixed use development on that site and propose a 2 to 4 story type of a project on that. Would be a site where something like that could happen if Ralph's, and with the grocery stores the way they are, something like that could, and that's a big site, something like that could happen at that corner. But this so far is the only development since the specific plan has been adopted, which is the old Nisei nursery site. So you can do a traditional strip commercial, which this really is. Somebody could have done residential here, but this property owner decided to improve the property with a brand new strip center, which actually has some really good tenants. And I think in terms of getting a restaurant, Tailgaters, which is a new sports bar, which is going to be opening very soon at the restaurant pad at that site, recently got approval to open, and they're doing tenant improvements right now. But I think this is turned out to be a pretty attractive center and really kind of doing a lot of the things that the specific plan in this area hoped for. in around 2006, and I really don't, it's not clear exactly, I believe I understand why the Grand and Route 66 corner was deemed to be such an important corner. We carved out from that Grand Avenue subdistrict that I just described a Grand Gateway, which just includes the properties. If you look at, this is Grand Avenue again, this is Route 66, and this subdistrict just includes these really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, no more, just those 5. And it's similar to the Grand Mixed Use District in that it allows both commercial and residential mixed use development, but it has a much more limited list of commercial uses that are allowed. There's a heavy emphasis on creating a gateway statement, again, with some sort of monumentation and creating that look on the corner. It has minimum setbacks like the Grand Gateway, unlike the Brand. It's not a maximum, it's a minimum setback. So buildings can be set back further, but they have to be set back at least that far. It does not include any provisions for development incentives within this corridor. There are no mixed-use development incentives to get you a higher density or greater height. While there's no maximum height listed for this subdistrict, it does talk about if you know a 2-story minimum height for properties that we're developing is up where the property size is 60,000 square feet or more. So it wanted a mass at that corner to create that statement. That's sort of the vision. When it talks about mixed use, this subdistrict talks about a second and third level of residential over commercial. So I would infer that this corner probably, is intended to accommodate a 3-story mixed use development if somebody wanted to do it. But that really hasn't happened and probably won't happen. But what has happened on the corner, I'll give you the northwest corner of Route 66. This is a 2-story commercial development. And it has, of course, that monumentation on the corner, the Route 66 monumentation, which was part of the gateway idea for this intersection. And then this is the other project that has occurred on the south west corner. And this project took many years to come to fruition. I think because it's such a small site, it's a former gas station, trying to fit a new building on this property was very difficult, and it took a lot of going back and forth with the property owner. They didn't want to build a new building. They did want to build a new building. Somebody wanted just to remodel the old gas station building, but I think we really, stuck to our guns in terms of trying to, really establish that vision on this corner and came up, even though it's a small building, it's a good-looking building. The town center mixed use. Now, this subdistrict is where the Avalon Bay project is taking place, as well as the station development. It is the largest subdistrict within the corridor. The Route 66 specific plan itself covers about 287 acres. This subdistrict is just over 95 acres. So it's really, you're approaching a third or more of the entire subdistrict, of the entire corridor is just the town center mixed use. To give you some orientation, it goes all the way south to Colorado, going north on Glendora, all the way up to Foothill. So actually, City Hall, where we're sitting right now, is in the Route 66 specific plan, Town Center Mixed Use Subdistrict. It also includes to the west, it touches part of the hospital, part of the parking lot is within this subdistrict, and it goes as far west as Parker to the west on Route 66, and I believe over here this is Pasadena on the east. Couple of the major developments that have been occurring on here, this is the location of the Glendora Station development, which is almost finishing construction, and this corner here, Grand and Route 66, is the Avalon Bay development that we talked about at the last meeting. The intent of this subdistrict, again, this is a mixed-use subdistrict. It's intended for a mix of land uses and development types that are compatible and reinforce both pedestrian activity and transit utilization. Because it's so close to the Gold Line station, the intent of this corridor really is to increase density, to create increase pedestrian activity, to create visual and real linkages between Route 66 and the village, which goes all the way back to the Alosta Corridor Committee. And out of that, we get this. It also talks about as its goal, and there's a number, sometimes there's, on these zoning documents, there's some variation, and I think things that are in there that really are not in your report. And this is out of the specific plan. It says single-family and multifamily residential commercial uses and smaller street scale oriented development. The single-family is not actually a permitted use in this subdistrict. It has to be multifamily. This is the other subdistrict that has a maximum setback where buildings cannot be any further back than 10 feet. And it really encourages buildings to be right on the sidewalk in this subdistrict in Barranca Gateway if possible. It allows, like I said, mixed-use development, commercial, really encourages that and provides the greatest incentives for doing mixed use in terms of getting additional height and density. But it also allows commercial development, office, retail, restaurants, et cetera, by themselves. In terms of a kind of a maximum height, in theory, you could, if a developer was able to put together a large enough site and to get a mixed-use development, as well as combining other lots in the area, in theory, the maximum that the city could approve under the specific plan, and this has always been the same since 2003. This has not been changed. I got a question at a meeting a while saying, "Oh, didn't you increase the height for Avalon Bay?" No, the height wasn't increased. This was in the code. And actually, the Avalon Bay project is exactly the type of project that the specific plan envisions. It's the easiest to accommodate within the development standards that are in the specific plan. With those incentives, you could, in theory, get a 5-story building, although Avalon Bay is only 3- and 4-story, 60 feet tall and up to 75 feet tall with architectural features above a roof line. It also includes, and I think this is true in every residential subdistrict. We have not seen this development yet, but the concept of live-work units is allowed by right in all of the subdistricts where residential is allowed. And the specific plan contains standards for live-work type units, although we have not seen a developer, since I've been here, propose live-work units. This gives you a couple pictures of the type of development. This is the Glendora Station development. These are 3-level townhomes fronting on Glendora, and you can kind of see as the corridor is developing with the buildings close to the street, having trees and the sidewalk, ultimately trying to create that pedestrian linkage up to Glendora Avenue with the housing. For this project, we did have to do one code change, and that was not to require commercial as part of this development. One of the things about the specific plan in all of the residential subdistricts is they all require that mixed use be a part of every residential development. And so we had to accept this property from requiring residential development. But again, these are for sale townhomes, and you can drive by them and see what they look like. And of course, the Avalon Bay development, this is the other development occurring. And it's actually, I think, starting to take shape for what it will ultimately look like in this picture. But and again, you can't see, and we always got comments about the parking structure, and here's taken from Route 66. You can't see the parking structure. Moving on to the next subdistrict. Now we're getting out of the residentially mixed-use oriented areas, and we're getting into the commercial areas. I think this is the second largest subdistrict along the corridor, although it's a lot smaller than the TCMU subdistrict. This is the route service commercial, and it extends roughly from Pasadena all the way to where the railroad bridge crosses Route 66. And this subdistrict really is oriented for smaller scale, light industrial, office, and commercial uses. And it specifically encourages low intensity assembly and warehousing under one roof. It was primarily envisioned as a node for locally serving businesses. Probably some of them who are there now could fit into this type of activity, including auto uses are allowed in this subdistrict. Residential is not allowed within this subdistrict, so it's entirely commercial, and I think this is where the specific plan really starts talking about and encouraging that daytime population that was important, going back to the Alosta Corridor Committee. It has a 20-foot setback for buildings. One of the interesting things about, in terms of consolidating lots, the minimum lot frontage under this subdistrict is 300 feet. 300 feet is a big frontage. Most of those lots are very narrow. And again, the emphasis is to consolidate those small parcels so you have a site that can be developed. The maximum height is 35 feet or 2 stories. There's no increase. There's no height incentives. There is a floor area ratio incentive. If you do lot consolidation, you could increase your lot coverage, so the massing of a building on the lot. But as I read the code, you could not go higher than 35 feet or 2 stories in this subdistrict. This is example of the only project that's been done since I've been here in this subdistrict. This is the Citrus Valley Board of Realtors. As you'll notice, this is a more traditional situation where you have the building set back quite a ways from the street with the field of parking in front of it, which you can do in this subdistrict. This is the last residential subdistrict. It's sort of sandwiched. They sort of stuck this in within the RSC zone, and I think they did it because there was already existing a fair number, a couple of apartment and I think maybe a condo project within this subdistrict, which extends from Elwood on the east all the way to Lamar Park on the west, and it's on the south side of Route 66. This is not a mixed-use subdistrict. It only allows residential, but it does allow commercial on the corners. So you could put commercial is allowed on the corner of Lamar Park or on the corner of Elwood, where you have the 31 Flavors located. So that was carved out for commercial. There's a minimum 15-foot street setback. For residential, you can it's the lesser of 45 feet or 3 stories, and allowing up to 35 units per acre in terms of a development. This is the one residential development that has been built within this subdistrict. This is the Elwood Apartments. This is a workforce housing development. And I think if one of the things that was in the Glendora report is to ensure everybody that Avalon Bay was not a low-income development. But the housing, I think if people would consider the quality of housing that workforce income level people are living in, some of the pictures I showed you of the mobile home lots, those are people that are working in restaurants and working in other places that provide daily services that majority of people who may own single-family homes who live here use. And I think this is actually involved the closure of an old mobile home park and some pretty old bad commercial, like what I was showing you in some other pictures. And then we got this project, which is much higher quality of affordable housing for working people than some of the mobile home parks and really older apartments that are all along this corridor. Moving again eastward, and I'll go more quickly through these. This is the Lone Hill Gateway. It's a commercial subdistrict. The main anchor is the Stater Brothers Shopping Center. It really is another gateway area envisioned as a front door. Oh, thank you. I need some water. Give me a second since I've been yammering on for so long. This is intended as well as a gateway because, of course, there's a off ramp at Foothill, our Lone Hill, and the 210 freeway, and of course we have our main sales tax generating area in the Diamond Ridge and the Marketplace shopping centers. This is it's really the development standards really suggest neighborhood commercial type development, 2-story a maximum, but I think in this area you're not going to see much change. Most of the properties, I think the Stater Brothers Shopping Center is probably the only place where you could see some redevelopment, and that center was recently renovated within the last 10 years, so probably be pretty static. The last sub-district to the very east is the Technology, Commerce, and Office, and I think when the folks were, and I've talked to some of the people who were on the committee and said, yeah, when we looked at Huntington Drive and Monrovia, we were really hoping that we could attract some high-tech type uses. And while you have some of our better this really is going from the Financial Way office complex all the way to Amelia. And so you have America's Christian Credit Union, there's a commercial or office building here, but there's housing here. And so that's never going to change. And so the opportunities to develop office and high tech in this area are pretty limited. You know, with the kind of the configuration of these parcels here, you have the Latter-day Saints Church here. This corner is really the only opportunity where you have the frozen ropes, so forth, where there'd be an opportunity for any type of office high-tech development. So really, in terms of the strategy to create jobs and to have that more daytime population really rests in the RSC subdistrict. I think that's really where it would have to happen, because with the Saratoga taking out this area, it's just not going to happen. I won't talk about the development standards. It allows up to 3 stories, so you can do a 3-story office building. There is an entire section on architecture and design guidelines within the subdistrict. Some of the key elements that are policy statements within the design guidelines I put here were the desire to reflect a historic character of the city, and specifically 40s and 50s nostalgia. And this is recalling the Route 66 sort of era of, you know, how everybody, the Mother Road and all that type of, you know, recalling that era. There are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, about 7 or 8 architectural styles that are talked about as desirable styles. It's not a have to, it's a you should try to do this type of a style. They're guidelines. It's not a hard and fast type of style that you have to choose, but you have your sort of Mission, Spanish Revival, Monterey style, and these pictures are directly out of the specific plan that I'm pulling out here, which is, of course, your standard. You've seen some of the Spanish style stuff. Art Deco, Moderne. And I put and actually the Arco station there is in the specific plan itself. And as I was sort of going through some old electronic files, I guess that I believe the redevelopment agency had actually helped fund that renovation of the Arco station, I found out. And there was actually some, you know, some press clippings with people, you know, really kind of, this is the type of architecture that we're trying to achieve on the corridor. Craftsman, of course, this is sort of a commercial Craftsman. I think we've seen that with both the Glendora Station project as well as what you'll see when it's finished, the Avalon Bay project. Traditional storefront, which is a lot like the downtown village area. And contemporary highway vernacular. And I know these aren't the best pictures, but these were what are in the specific plan. And it's really just contemporary, you know, commercial strip. Streetscape design. There's a comprehensive streetscape design that I think the redevelopment agency was, if you read the specific plan, the redevelopment agency was intended to fund a large part of that. We haven't adhered to that exactly as some of the developments have been occurring. I think some of the objectives of the community services department relative to, you know, what types of trees and improvements may occur are not, they may have changed, but we do have guidelines that we try to follow whenever development comes in terms of a streetscape, as well as kind of trying to keep to the gateway themes that are within the specific plan, these major intersections like Grand, Glendora, Lone Hill, etc. Implementing and looking forward, the specific plan kind of, and I'm going to wrap up here, was anticipated to occur over a 20-year period, and we're in about year 11 of that. And we've seen a handful of developments that have occurred, and I think when, you know, one of the things that the surveyor said about, you know, the concerns about development matching ebbs and flows in the economy, that's exactly what we've seen with Route 66. We had a few developments before the crash happened in 2008, then everything died. And now we've had a few more developments beginning in about 2011. And while we may get a few others, this business cycle will end too, and we'll have a lull in development. So it won't all happen at one time. It may not all happen as much as we'd like in 20 years. I think I've talked about this. The specific plan is intended to, again, facilitate development of small and ill-configured parcels with these development incentives to consolidate, and the objective to both bring more rooftops in terms of new housing into the corridor, as well as an increased daytime population of jobs to help really support better commercial and create more vitality, to use transit, such as the future Gold Line coming to the area, all of those planning policies. Again, to rebrand the corridor from Alosta to Route 66 as a way to market the corridor, as well as a way to really change the vision and direction for the corridor going forward. I talked about the Hoffman study about the economic limitations as well as opportunities that are in the corridor, such as the 210 extension, APU expansion, the Gold Line coming. All those things were thought about when this document was being formulated. I talked about, again, the growth pattern mirrors the business cycle, ebbs and flows. People see something come up and they want to know what's going on, and hopefully this helps explain some of that. I think one of the things to note is that residential development has outpaced commercial development within the district. Residential development, Glendora, whenever we get a new development, we always say Glendora is a great place to live. Residential developers, if they can find land big enough and if they can purchase it at a price where they can develop residential mixed-use multifamily development on the corridor, there is an attraction to do that because of the quality of the Glendora community. Also, for property owners, if your property is zoned residential multifamily at a potential development of 20 to 50 units per the acre, the value of a commercially zoned property is not going to render the same thing. So there's not the same kind of economic incentive to get those types of jobs. And I think that was really, if you look at the Monrovia example as the model, I mean, that East Huntington Drive was all the redevelopment agency. I mean, there was no project that happened between Myrtle Avenue and Mountain without the redevelopment agency being involved to help assemble land. And unfortunately, we don't have that, so we have to rely only on the private market, and it's not happened yet, in terms of the eastern section of the corridor. But, we'll keep going at it, and hopefully there'll be some opportunities that come along there. But again, that remains the major challenge for the corridor. I think going forward, I think that the 3 or 4 significant residential projects that we've seen on the corridor will be what we have. And I haven't, there's not somebody coming and applying for only one other project that the council hasn't seen. That really concludes my report, and hopefully that provides you what you were looking for with the corridor. I'm happy to answer